all for joining us today for Period Action Day 2021. My name is Jasmine Shabazz, and I am a board member and Youth Advisory Council member for Period. I will be your host today as we listen to the founders of the Black OB-GYN Project, as well as Indo Black, discuss all their experiences within their respective organizations and how they uplift the menstrual health and menstrual equity space. Today, we'll be engaging in a very powerful discussion with these panelists who have a lot of passion and experience in this topic. We will start by having each panelist introduce themselves and their work in the menstrual equity space.
Hello, my name is Lauren Kornegay, and I am the founder and executive director of Indo Black Incorporated. We are a Black women-led organization focusing on advocacy work for African-American women and women of color affected by endometriosis.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Period, for inviting me to this panel. I'm so honored to speak alongside Lauren, someone who I admire so much as the founder of Indo Black. My name is Rachel Bervell. I am one of the founders of the Instagram page, the Black OB-GYN Project. It's a space created by medical trainees to both encourage providers who are Black in the reproductive health space and patients as well as advocates to remind us that those disparities that so often impact Black reproducing peoples can be combated. I have been humbled to see the growth of the Instagram page has not just been a space to really talk about issues surrounding what it's like to be a Black birthing person or a Black person with a womb, but has now become a space of education, has become a space of connecting patients to other Black providers so they feel like they can receive culturally competent care, and a space to empower Black stories of joy and resistance and resilience in healthcare, because we are often only seeing the negative, detrimental stories. So I'm really excited today to speak with Period, speak with you all about just being an advocate in reproductive health.
Thank you, Rachel and Lauren. We're excited to have you here today. So to go off of what you just said, Rachel, you mentioned that creating spaces for Black people are extremely important, and spaces for us typically serve as a way to build community and provide other resources and necessities for us. With such a huge rise in interest and advocacy in menstrual disorders and overall reproductive health, can you each explain how your respective organizations serve as what I consider, and I'm sure many others do as well, a crucial component in this growing movement for Black patients and menstruators?
Of course, I'll go first, and I think it's fitting that Lauren will go after me to talk about a specific area of menstrual health and reproductive health. So as the Black OB-GYN Project, as I mentioned, it's an Instagram space. And I think social media has the opportunity to do many different things. You can share stories, you can share education, you can share knowledge, and you can make connections. And I think that we've used the space to do all of those things when it comes to menstrual health. As I mentioned, there's so many disparities, for better and for worse, unfortunately, that impact Black people, Black reproducing people. And I say that because I am really wanting to be really all-inclusive of anyone that they identify with that statement. That means that we are really trying to amplify stories of Black people that are often not spoken about, not shared. And if they are shared, try to just let others know that they're not alone. And that's what the Black OB-GYN page is. Another one of the most common questions that I get in the direct messages, as well as emails every day, multiple queries, is from individuals who have stumbled upon the page, wondering if they could be connected to a Black physician and a Black provider. In the United States, only about 5% of all physicians identify as Black. but we know that the population of Black individuals is almost 13 to 15%. And there's a great disparity when it comes to having that culturally competent and cultural humble care, meaning that when you go to the healthcare space, you are not just seen as the patient, but you're also seen as the provider. And so those biases that people come in with are diminished because you have a provider who looks at you and says, you look like my sister, or you look like my family member. And so that's been a real honor with my space in terms of menstrual equity, to make sure that people, if they're having issues with their periods, if they feel like they're pregnant and they want to have a Black provider, they can have connections to organizations that I've been really grateful to be connected to personally. They're the founders of, like Health and Her Hue and so many others, that they can be connected to those organizations and find a provider to reduce the disparities that come within menstrual equity, health, care, and reproductive wellness.
Rachel, I just want to say that you just laid it all out there, and that was perfect how you just shared all of that information. And I just want to piggyback off what you said about how it's very simple to go to the doctor and see yourself and feel comfortable. But if that opportunity is not provided, then that is already another barrier that we have to deal with. So with Indo Black Incorporated, we try to make sure that we are advocating for African-American women, of course, but our biggest thing is trying to build a bridge and connecting women within the community with the medical professionals. And our hopes are to encourage women to get the actual resources that they need, whether that may look like a safe space to just talk to people that look like them, whether that may look like, just seeing a post that's information about how to be properly diagnosed with endometriosis, or just sharing information in reference to non-toxic chemicals with sanitary napkins. So those are some of the things that we try to make sure that we bridge the gap with. And I also want to share that some of the work that we do is something that I genuinely think will help us get to a better place as a community. Working together, speaking with each other, conversations like this within the community can build that gap. It may not happen overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day, but over time we can get to a better place. And I think that the first step is to make sure that we open up conversation pieces on menstrual health more often, talking with younger women, young adults in the community that are dealing with these issues. So that is something that we are trying to do. We have an initiative called Period Care Initiative, where we actually donate non-toxic chemical sanitary napkins as well as period care items to domestic violence survivors as well as young adults. And our hopes are that we bridge that gap by communicating about their cycles, one, making them feel comfortable about, hey, I have a cycle and this is what I'm going through. Is this normal? Because that is the first step, just recognizing that we can have this conversation and I'm in pain and I want to tell my mother, I want to tell my aunts, I want to be able to talk to a doctor that looks like me so that I don't feel, alone or ashamed. So just building an opportunity for young people to do that, but then get into another space where we're like, okay, now that I'm vocal about what's going on with me, what do I do? Who do I go see? Who do I talk to about this? Can I get a doctor to help me with X, Y, and Z? Because as you know, this goes back. Young children are starting their cycles at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And if we get them to get to a comfortable place to communicate effectively what's going on with them, we can get them to a doctor sooner to figure out whatever the situation may possibly be. And I also would like to share that in doing research, the American OBGYN Journal reported that 40% of African-American women were diagnosed with pelvic inflammatory disease, when in actuality, they really had endometriosis. That is 40%. So that shows you right there that we are at a place where we have hit a road. We've hit a road bump. But because of the research, we can correct our error and we can get to a better place where we are educating young people, where we are educating ourselves, where we were having conversations with doctors that look like us and that don't look like us to make sure that we are bridging that gap and that we are communicating how we feel as a community and how important it is to have menstrual health and health equity in the community.
Thank you. Wow, that's really powerful and impactful work that you both do in educating our communities and even in our internet space of how we can receive menstrual education. And it's something that's very important and isn't emphasized enough in sexual education, for example. So with that being said, that brings up a question that I tend to ask a lot of people. And what conversation do you wish that you had as a child about menstruation, and how do you convey those same conversations to younger children as well? So I know, Lauren, you spoke a little bit about that, but that takes things just a little bit deeper of, thinking back to when you were a child and how did you first learn about menstruation, and knowing what you know now, what conversation do you wish that you had?
For me, I just wish that we didn't normalize the pain. I think that that is the biggest thing. Oftentimes with Black women, we are deemed as strong Black women, and that we are. However, when we are putting a adjective on who we are, it makes it seem like that is all we can be, where we can't have possible weak moments, or we can't have sadness, or we can't be in touch with our feelings at that moment and be in pain. So just the educational piece about, pain is not normal. Now, some cramps, okay. But the way I used to be laid out on the ground, that is not acceptable. And if we get to a better place where we communicate and we are educating each other, and I keep going back to education because that is the root. I think that we will get to a better place, because I only was told that pain was normal because that's what my mother was told. And that's what her mother was told. And it's a cycle. If we don't have the educational piece, and I can't be mad at my grandmother, I can't be mad at my mother. We're going off what research has shown us in the past, whether that may be the research that was never existent or the research that was very, very rare. So, just the fact that your pain is not normal. And also just the fact that, let's get to a place where we are communicating. My mother used to say, young ladies don't talk about their periods. Well, unfortunately, we have to. We have to talk about our periods, because that is actually the deciding factor in if we recognize there's something wrong or not. Comparing your cycle to someone else's makes you realize that, hey, either what I'm going through is similar to yours, or this isn't normal. A lot of women or young children, teenagers, they used to talk about how they threw up as a child. And I never had that experience until I became an adult, but I could not have imagined at 16 throwing up and having to go home from school because I threw up because I was on my cycle. That is horrific. And for people, unfortunately, to tell someone that's normal, that's unfortunate, because it's not.
Very similar to what Lauren said. I think I wish I knew that there was a spectrum of normalcy. So I think for Lauren, she wishes people told her that pain is not normal, which kind of, for me, I'm like, okay, a step further, that there is a spectrum of what is normal. That what is normal could mean having very heavy cycles and very heavy periods. And when I say normal, maybe that's the wrong word, but what is possible, what a period experience is, can look like fibroids, can look like endo, which for me, I didn't know until I was training in medical spaces, can look like no pain, no cramps, right? And that there is a range and there is a specific framework within that range of this is when you don't need to go to the physician and ask for help. And this is when things are not something you should tolerate, right? So again, for what Lauren was saying and what many other patients that I've interacted with and even friends and family have mentioned is that they grew up thinking that bleeding through your clothes on your period was normal. That is part of the range. And I wish someone says, hey, hun, when you first get your period, this can happen. But if it does happen, now this is the part that I wish happened when I was young. If it does happen, actually, it's not something you should ignore or you should tolerate. If you're in a lot of pain, yes, Black women are strong. Yes, Black women are resilient. But a level of pain during your cycle is not something to ignore. There could be an issue. Because I think what ends up happening and why we see a lot of disparities, both as a person with a period and a person that's seen others with periods come in, is that Black women end up being the last people in the room saying, I think I need help, right? And that's because we're not talking about the range, we're not sharing those experiences, and we're not having an opportunity to say, if you reach this criteria, this limitation point, this is where you need to ring the alarm. We're just thinking that, this is life, this is happening. No one told me where it should start, when it should end. And so I'm just going to keep going because I think this is fine. But it's like, no, there's a range of normal. And this is when you should, these are the different experiences. This is what the experience is. And this is when you should come running to me. And I'm here to help get you through it. So I think, and I love what you just said, Lauren, too, that it comes down to education. But not just education, it comes down to being very frank and open and hearing the humanity of our health and our well-being, right? Because I can educate as from a doctor's hat, but if I educate as like, hey, girlfriend, this is just, let me tell you about Lady Flo coming in today. That's a different hat, right? But we need to talk about it and we need to be free to talk about it. And that's part of education. And so I think those would be kind of like the two things I wish I had known,
Thank you for both sharing. And you both are right in that talking about menstruation is something that's very important, especially as a young age. And menstruation as a whole is very taboo in many different cultures. And in the Black culture, even across the diaspora, it's a very taboo topic. I mean, I grew up in the South and I didn't know what menstruation was until I got my first period. By then it's almost too late I'm seeing other Black girls with me growing up and seeing blood on their clothes and understanding that like, I'm in the 3rd or 4th grade. Hey y'all, like you're having your cycle and them not knowing what their cycles is. It's kind of heartbreaking looking back on it and how we don't start those conversations earlier. So we've all seen how the stigma around menstruation kind of impacts not only patients, but just everyday menstruators, whether they're in or outside the exam room. How can that internalized and externalized stigma be combated in our communities? And what work have you done with your, the Black OBGYN project and Indo Black to combat that?
That is such a good question. Really powerful question. So I think you're right. I think when I say we as an American society, we have made talking about reproductive health in general a taboo. Unfortunately, reproductive health, and this can mean a lot of things, it's become politicized. It's become something we don't talk about whatsoever. I mean, it's become a range of different things, but the thing that it unfortunately just never becomes is like normalized and human. Like half the population is going to go through something that has to do with periods. And yet we either don't talk about it as a culture or we talk about it in a way that it's like what's going on in the politics and society today. Like we have to put restrictions on what you can do with it. but no one wants to talk about what it is. And I think what ends up happening is that healthcare in general, but reproductive healthcare, which becomes even more sensitive, and it's a very private matter because of where those organs are and what is going on. And the fact that no one wants to talk about it seeps into so many other dynamics of our wellness and our well-being and our lived experiences. So your question of like, what are we doing to kind of combat this idea of taboo? Well, first we need to understand that period inequities influence education. Because if you think about it, in other countries, if a girl's on her period, she's not allowed to go to school, right? If you're having really bad cramps, not even cramps, if you're having pain, you might not be able to work or get your degree, or you have to delay it or whatever. It impacts healthcare because it can impact your mental well-being if things are going wrong. It can impact your other well-being, your other parts of your body. It impacts economic mobility, right? There's a lot of talk about menstrual inequities when it comes to people who are homeless, menstrual inequities to come to people who are marginalized, so BIPOC communities, as well as LGBTQI communities, right? Economic mobility in that if you are transgender and there's other issues going on and you have a period still, and there's people saying that you can't work, you can't get money, just like so many layers because of your period. That's where it started, but it's trickling down to so many other dynamics of you. You just can't make it. And like I said, it impacts politics. And so for me, what I've done with the Black OBGYN Project and those that are affiliated with us, we try to have conversations about what it means to have a period early. I had the great honor earlier this year to speak with an organization called, for example, Mothers and Vessels. And it's a beautiful organization of Black moms and their daughters. And I was with Shanisha Bonswell, who is the founder of Black Moms Blog as well. And we talked to girls age 7 to 14 about periods. And it was a conversation where, you know, we didn't talk about sex. We didn't talk about all of that. We just talked about when you get to a certain age, you will enter a debut of womanhood. And that debut means having a period. What does that mean? What does that look like? What questions do you ladies, young women have? Ask us anything. And moms were there with their young daughters, and we talked about this. And it was just so enriching for me. And it was a reminder that in order for us to fix all these bigger issues, which happen down the road, like I said, healthcare, education, economic mobility, the things that periods can cause issues with when there's inequities, we need to just have the conversation of like what it is, because we're not talking about what it is in the first place, right? Like I said in the beginning. And so that's kind of where I am in this. And I know it's hard because we just don't like talking about it. We think that, ew, gross, you're bleeding. But it's like, ew, gross, that bleeding is actually bringing humanity to fruition. And so we do have to mention it. And when something goes wrong, it plays a big role in so many other departments of that individual's life. And so it's just really exciting to talk to young girls and their families about this topic.
And for Enzo Black, we are actually getting ready to implement a new sub-initiative of our period care initiative next year. It's fairly new. It's a pilot program where we want to connect with the local high school in the area. And we live in, well, I live in Prince George's County, which is a predominantly Black county in the state of Maryland. So the idea is to connect with a public high school and connect with them to the point where we are able to put sanitary napkins inside of their public restrooms in hopes of the educational piece. Now, we are also thinking of, implementing a talk series, but of course, you have to get permission and there's loopholes, so we have to be careful about how we maneuver this. However, we are hoping to have these conversations similar to what the Black OBGYN Project is doing, and just making young women feel comfortable with those conversations. Our target audience is the ages of 18 to 45. So really, we've started recognizing that 18 to 20 is a very prevalent age. I actually was diagnosed with endometriosis at the age of 20. So this is the time where women are recognizing really what's happening with their body, because unfortunately, most of them are going off on their own. And they're like, I'm by myself. This is different. How do I fix it? So we want to make sure that we are building a gateway for women to open up and say, hey, I'm 18. This happened and I don't know what to do about it. So let's get to a better place. So 18 to 20, we really want to focus on that age range. And we also want to focus on the sub-initiative by helping these young women. It's education, it's vocalization, making sure that they are comfortable with opening up and talking about these things that are considered to be taboo. And we can go back to what Rachel said about it's when it comes to politics, we love talking about it. You know, we love talking about it. But when we're actually in the midst of it, we can't talk about it. And to be clear, when I say we love talking about it, it's not even women, it's men. It's men that are talking about it. It's men that are telling us what we can and cannot do with our bodies, or what is allowed or what shouldn't be allowed. People that have not given birth. You know, they just came from a woman. So we have to get to a place where the educational piece. And another thing that Into Black is really trying to focus on is getting outside of ourselves, because talking about it to us, it's great, it's helpful, but it doesn't really change anything. We have to talk to the people that don't have cycles at all, because they will be the ones that recognize, they will be the ones that start pointing things out. And I've seen a number of conversations on Instagram, on Twitter, that have shocked me to my core. And I've been so excited about it, where a woman has said something and then a man has followed up and said, have you heard of endometriosis? Have you gotten checked for endometriosis? I'm like, you know what endometriosis is? Look at you. So we have to educate multiple people. We can't just educate women or people that are having menstrual cycles. We have to educate everybody in the sense to make sure that people are understanding, because there are fathers, there are brothers, there are uncles that really see how women or how people that operate with menstrual cycles feel when there is something going on. And I've heard numerous conversations where I'll hear them say, well, shouldn't you get checked? Aren't you in pain? Is it something going on? And sometimes we need that, because as women, we continue to go. We'll keep going and keep going, even if we know we are in pain. So sometimes educating other people on what's going on within the community allows for us to get to a space where they're correcting our behavior and pushing us in the right direction to go get the help that we need. So we're doing our period care initiative, hoping to do our sub-initiative in the community. And I'm sorry, I didn't tell you the name of it. It's called Pink, providing items now to kids. It's so cute. I just was, I had to share with them. And then we're also looking to do a talking series with local colleges to make sure that we get to a better place. So those are some of the things that we're doing to combat the tabooness of menstrual cycles.
I love it. I love that you guys are both creating and participating in spaces with community education on menstrual health. But what you said, Lauren, about menstrual health education is not limited to menstruators, and that there are non-menstruators who will sit there and point out symptoms of endometriosis, of other menstrual disorders that they recognize. And because you as a menstruator are so used to that pain, that it takes someone else to recognize that pain in you. And that was, it's mind-blowing to just see how other people can recognize your pain and you just be like, oh, like just brush it off, like, oh, this is completely normal for me, and not think anything of it. There's this new wave on social media that I've been seeing of non-menstruators even carrying period products with them, because they never know of, especially, seeing young Black men carrying period products, because they never know whether a menstruator near them might need a product or might ask for one. And what happens if another menstruator doesn't have one? of them just being more mindful of that. And it makes me realize just how much better this space would be in community building and going beyond just talking about menstruators. And, while we're the focus of this movement, it's also important that we bring in others too, of people who don't bleed, because they matter in understanding how we can better our own health. And, maybe even like Rachel said, not every OBGYN is a menstruator, and they're also providing that education as well. We spent so much time talking about how we're creating new spaces for menstruators to, learn more about their own menstrual health and recognizing what the, normal range of pain is, like Rachel mentioned earlier, and you mentioned, Lauren. But what I want to concentrate now is how do you guys find joy in this movement? We talked so much about the people that we meet and the work that we're doing, but what was the first moment for you all of recognizing that you feel joy and fulfilled in this movement?
I think for me, it was being able to connect with women that look like me. I think that has been the most joyful experience for me, regardless if it has been endometriosis or PCOS, fibroids, health equity. It's like I have grown in the community with other women who are now some of my closest friends. We have group chats where we just go, we don't talk about endometriosis. We just, hey girl, what y'all doing? So it's helpful. It's very, very helpful. I think that connecting and talking to other women and building things with other women and being creative, even if it's just simply bouncing ideas off of each other, being able to create it. And I call them my endo tribe. And I just feel so amazing to have people in my circle that are rooting for me, because they know my struggles and they know my ins and outs, and they know from a standpoint of women's reproductive. They know how I feel. They know when we're tired, when we can't push forward sometimes. They understand it. So it's like they're consistently rooting for me. And I think also being able to make other people feel happy has really brought joy to my life. Whether it's, connecting someone with a OBGYN specialist or providing resources in the community, or just even simply saying hello and them being okay with that. And it's just like, I don't think without endometriosis, I would have had those experiences. Sure, I would have probably been connected with women because I'm, that's who I am. But without endometriosis, I would not have connected with women with endometriosis. We would not have built our endo tribe. We would not have been able to build all the resources and connect these women to a variety of different endo advocates within the community. So that has really brought me much joy, and I love it. And that is actually something that motivates me to continue this work, because when you start originally, you do this because you recognize this has something to do with you. But when you're in it, this no longer is about you. It's more about the community and connecting, whether it's young women, older women, mid-aged women, women of all shapes and sizes, of all ethnicities, backgrounds. We're just in this together. So recognizing that this is no longer about me. This is bigger than me. This is about a community of women who need help. This is about a community of people that menstruate, that need help. This is about a community of Black women that need help. There's so many communities, and we're all coming together to make things happen. So that brings me so much joy.
And just on a very related note, for me, when I got joy in that opportunity to see someone's light bulb go off, like, oh my gosh, okay, this is not something that I have to hide as a secret. Those conversations, it's like being able to have those conversations and seeing the reaction that results, that's joyful, right? If someone comes to you and says, this is the first time I feel heard, that my pain is not normal, or that my periods are a little bit wonky and I need to get it fixed. This is the first time that someone has looked at me and listened, not interrupted, but listened to my story. And you see, even sometimes these are painful interactions, right? But you see this light bulb go off of like, wow, there is something beyond this. That brings me joy. And I feel like in the role that I have as a content creator, a reproductive health advocate, you know, I don't know the people that I'm interacting with most of the time in these spaces. These are not my patients. And I make a very clear stance in that I am not your provider. I cannot provide medical decisions for you. But my ability to educate and say, hey, let me just tell you the facts of the matter in a way that you understand and see you be like, oh, that's the way it works, is so, for me, empowering and beautiful. And then I think kind of on an unrelated note of menstrual equity, but still brings me a lot of joy, is the opportunity to use my platform to not just talk about health issues. And I think that can be challenging. I think, you know, when you have a platform that's focused on health and well-being, you kind of feel like everything that has to come out of your mouth needs to literally only be about, like, let's say, periods forever and ever and ever and ever. But it's okay for you just to put something up that's a quote that says, hey, let's just enjoy, smell a rose, right? Or today, take 5 seconds and go outside and just feel the cold air in your nostrils. This has nothing to do with health and well-being, right? Like in terms of reproductive health and well-being. But I find great joy in just kind of reminding people that you are more than your womb. I think that's the point. And so, for example, on the Instagram page, every once in a while, I'll do these random little posts of like Black girl magic. And it'll be like a series of little clips or like cool little things I've seen on social medias or things that went viral of, you know, people doing something. I know I have one that I really want to do. Like Black boy joy, you know, why would I be celebrating Black boys on a page that's talking about OBGYN issues? It's kind of like Lauren said, this is a conversation that should be universal, you know, and everything is connected. So the opportunity to celebrate and highlight Black boy joy is related to reproductive health care. And yes, it doesn't have to do with menstrual equity. And we're not talking about like advocating, burn down the system, let's start, you know, but it's, in a way, it's a distraction for us to remind ourselves that we are human, despite the health issues that are going on around us. And that brings me immense joy. The opportunity to say Black excellence, you know, today we're going to take a pause on the health talk and just say Black excellence. Here's some posts of some cool people that are doing some cool things. Just it's a reel of some funny videos. It's just a smile, get your mind off the craziness. And then now, tomorrow, we're back on it. We're going to talk about endo. We're going to talk about PCOS. We're going back, but got to take a breath. Everybody ready? Okay, let's do a 5-second thing. You know, that brings me joy to be like, we are human. We're not machines. We're human too. So I think those two things bring me joy.
You're right. We are human. We're not machines. And I think that's a good lesson for everyone, myself included, and our audience, to just, you know, take things slow and slow down, and knowing that it's okay if you can't process, you know, all of this pain and this trauma that's been circulating a lot lately in obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive health as a whole, menstrual injustice and menstrual disorders of, you know, like you said, go outside, smell the roses, take a deep breath, and recognize that what we do and how we choose to advocate for our communities looks different for everyone. And what you do with the information is entirely up to you, and knowing not only your own capabilities, but also knowing your community as well. And that's something that I've taken away from this conversation of, you know, what does community building look like, and how can we better serve our communities? And you guys are both really great examples of what it looks like to serve our communities in menstrual health education. So I want to thank you guys both for that and for joining us today. So for our viewers, how can viewers support your movement and sort of follow you guys on your path as you both grow your audience and your organization?
Before I answer that question, I just want to say that I appreciate this space so much, that we are not focusing on trauma. We're not focusing on adversity. We're not focusing on mortality and morbidity. And I'm not trying to ignore those issues that they exist, but we're allowing ourselves to say it's okay to celebrate. It's okay to take pride in periods, if that's what defines your womanhood, or if your periods are giving you issues or whatever, it's okay to talk about it. And it's okay to talk about it in ways that are not always negative. Right? So I think that's this, I love that. And I'm really glad to be a part of this movement with Period. Ways that people can support the Black OBGYN project. So I am actually trying to make the Black OBGYN project a more established organization right now, and in the very near future, what we hope, looking for volunteers. Unfortunately, I don't have the funding to pay people, but looking for volunteers to help with content creation. But in the interim, I just would appreciate people just continue to talk to us in our direct messages. It's always nice if you give us a follow, but I find that sometimes the people that aren't following us are the ones that we have the most fruitful conversations with, via email as well. Feel free to reach out to us. Yes, I do a lot of the things that are kind of in the forefront and much of the background, but I have an amazing, amazing group around the country of hundreds of Black OBGYNs that I'm connected to. And so if you are in need of help, assistance, or just a connection, do not hesitate to reach out. And as I kind of get the Black OBGYN, as a more official organization, again, the ability to move from a social media space to a more established space, like Lauren's been able to do with Endo Black, takes a lot of time, but it requires the support of those that are in the audience. And so if you are watching and you're not following the page, I would really appreciate a follow, because that at the end of the day provides an opportunity to eventually get funding. Maybe one day I can work on some grants that we can provide for people that want to do their own community engagement startups and reproductive healthcare. That would be beautiful. Like, hey, I'm a Black person and I want to do something cool. The Black OBGYN project has a small grant that I could apply to. But all of these big dreams happen with the small actions that are free. So liking posts, sharing posts, getting in the direct messages and saying, hey, can we do something about fat phobia? I'd be willing to help do some research on that. Maybe you can do a post or even just a story. Can you amplify my own page and send some people over here? We're doing midwifery stuff and doula stuff. We want to let people know that we exist. All of that, that's free. That's education. That's what we're talking about, amplifying. And so I would appreciate that people continue to engage in that manner with the page.
I love that, Rachel. It's not easy. None of this is easy at all. So just like Rachel said, just the support, whether it's a like, a share, a comment, a DM, those things are very, very beneficial to organizations like ourselves that are literally coming up out of the ground and really trying to grow and flourish and blossom in this community. You can definitely find Endo Black on Instagram at Endo_Black, or you can check us out on practically any social media platform. Just search Endo Black Incorporated. We are newly on TikTok. I have no idea what I'm doing on TikTok, but we're trying to get there. And like she said, the support is very important. We are in the process of expanding. So we are looking for volunteers in the community, whether it's as simple as wanting to support us when we drop off period care items to the domestic violence shelter. whether it's you want to do your own fundraiser and collect your own sanitary napkins to support our mission, or if you're interested in volunteering as a graphic designer or social media intern, or even just being a simple assistant to help us send out emails or cards to donors that have supported us in the past. Things like that go a long way. So those are ways that you can support us. Those are ways that you can find us. We are located in the DC metropolitan area, and in October, we will be having some amazing information on how to apply for our ambassadors program for the upcoming 2022 year. So if you're interested and you are in the DC metropolitan area, which is, we're going to say from Virginia all the way up into Baltimore, please, please, please reach out. We would love to have you. Thank you.
And thank you, Rachel and Lauren, for joining me today to talk more about menstrual health education and community building. I want to thank our audience for joining us, and thank you, and I hope you stay tuned for the rest of our panels.